Hello and welcome to 10 Things You Didn't Know About Big Pharma, video number 5. It occurred to me last night that these are things that Big Pharma doesn't know as well. So I've sort of changed tack as I've gone through this on the basis that I'm not trying to knock Big Pharma as many people do. I'm actually trying to say constructive things that could help for the future. So in the last video, I promised that I talk about modernized approaches to medicines development and to look at other sectors. And if we do look at those other sectors, we see that they develop their products totally differently to pharmaceutical companies. They actually engage with their end users as a first step. And a lot of the learning now comes from the work that was done in Japan in the late 50s, 60s and into the 70s. And as I say, the first step that we learnt from the Japanese work was you have to engage with your end user and develop a value for money proposition for them that is going to make them want to purchase the product. I only read today an article that two companies who would launch drugs in gene therapy, hugely high-priced drugs. They weren't selling because patients were looking at other ways of treating their conditions. So if you can't actually get healthcare systems and patients to pay for the drugs, then it's a false illusion that you're going to develop them and really bring them to the world. So and I'm going to say clearly here that we need a new model for developing medicines. This three-stage model that we have of discovery research, finding a molecule, handing that into another set of people who would spend years developing it, and then handing that over to a commercial organization who make it and sell it, is archaic. It needs to change. We need to go back to just a two-stage process, prototyping, deep stage prototyping early on, where we use things predictive in vitro, in silico and ex vivo technologies, where we actually learn as much as we can about the safety, efficacy and the manufacturability of drugs. And then from that we build prototypes in conjunction with healthcare professionals and patient groups, the people who understand the indication, they understand the epidemiology, they understand about the condition, working together with drug developers to bring innovative new products to market. So that's what I'm going to say more about here. So any company who wanted to do that, the first thing they would do, as I say, is engage with end users. And if we look at voice of the customer, that is an established technique now that's used, which defines very much what the end user of the product requires in that product. And it's possible to identify some key measures, some key elements that have to be delivered. Otherwise, the product will not sell and will not work. And to develop that voice of the customer, you actually, I use the term customer and end user interchangeably. I'm not seeing a customer as someone who pays for the product. I'm seeing the customer as someone who consumes the product, the end user of the product. And when I say consume, I mean a healthcare professional is part of the consumption process as they treat patients. So if you see it like that, you've got to talk to healthcare professionals, particularly who understand the indication deeply, and you use this voice of the customer to define exactly what you're trying to produce in a lot of detail. The technique, the methods are widely known in other sectors. It's just they aren't employed in pharmaceuticals because the patent has replaced the patient, the end user. So that's the first thing to say, is we've got to go right back to the initial stages of a condition, an indication, a disease, call it what you will. Do you need a medicine? If you do, are there things out there that could be used? Is there, I'm not saying herbal medicine per se, but a lot of products, food, all sorts of things, there is evidence that they are effective. But if you focus on high value added molecules, then you're never going to consider those, and that's not good for the patient. So at the early stage, companies in healthcare, in development medicine, should be looking at alternatives, to a molecule. If a molecule, large or small, is deemed necessary by the group of people there, then develop it as one program, a coordinated program with all the stakeholders involved. Again, if we look at aviation, that's a classic comparative example. Look at the safety levels in aviation, and who would develop a plane without being very closely engaged with pilots at every stage? Pharmaceutical companies don't engage with patients. In my book, Taming the Big Pharma Monster, I quote the CEO from Teva, who was just leaving, and he says, before you launch a drug, you know everything about it. 1 second after it's launched, all the patients know everything about it. I didn't quote that particularly well, but it's basically saying that pharma companies do not know about the drugs in anything like the depth that they should do, and when they get to market, that's when all the knowledge and the whole thing comes to fruition. So I hope that's been helpful. On video 6, I'm going to say more about building the value stream using strategic procurement and key supplier relationships to make sure that the supply chain is high integrity and most of all safe. Okay, speak soon. Thanks. Bye.